and welcome to Season 7 of Buffy and the Art of Story. If you love Buffy the Vampire Slayer and you love creating stories or just taking them apart to see how they work, you are at the right podcast. This time, I'm talking about the last Buffy Angel crossover for Season 7, Angel episode 15 of Season 4, Orpheus, where Angelus and Faith battle it out in Angel's or Angelus's head, and Willow comes to LA to try to restore Angel's soul. I am Lisa M. Lilly, author of the QC Davis crime novels and of supernatural suspense and thrillers, as well as the writing as a second career books for fiction writers. Along with the recap of Orpheus, today we'll talk about storylines that appear separate but converge into one gripping plot, using multiple characters to serve as one antagonist and a group as the protagonist, bringing necessary exposition out through intense conflict. Whether Willow's a different character on Angel than she is in Buffy Season 7, and how dramatic irony adds tension and keeps the audience engaged. As always, there will be no spoilers except in the foreshadowing section at the end. Remember, if you'd like to get more Buffy and the Art of Story content and support the podcast, you can do that at patreon.com/Lisa M. Lilly for less than the cost of a cup of coffee a month. Okay, let's dive into the Hellmouth. Orpheus aired the first time on March 19, 2003. It was written by Mayor Smith, who is credited with 11 Angel episodes but no Buffy episodes, and directed by Terrence O'Hara, who directed 6 Angel episodes but no Buffy episodes. And I am noting that because of what I see as the departures from who Willow is as a character in Season 7. The opening conflict picks up right where the last episode left off. In this warehouse or construction area, whatever it is, Angelus is breathing hard and he breaks away from biting Faith. He's clearly dizzy and he says, "What did you do?" There's a quick flashback to Faith. She pulls a syringe from an ankle holster while Angelus is shooting at Wesley and taunting him, which we saw last episode. She injects herself with a drug. In the present, Angelus keels over. He's passed out. Faith is breathing hard. She looks really woozy. Wesley finds them, asks if she's all right, and right before she passes out, Faith says, "Kicked his ass," and we go to credits. At the hotel that's the home base for Angel investigations, Fred reads an antique-looking book. Gunn runs in carrying Angelus and yelling for Connor. Lauren enters the lobby and panics at Angelus being there. Connor rushes down to help, and he and Gunn get Angelus in steel shackles and leg irons. Wesley enters. He's carrying Faith, who is unconscious. She's got a huge bandage on her neck. There's blood coming through it. And when the others ask what happened to Faith, Wesley just says she captured Angelus. The scene switches to slow motion as Wesley carries her to a room. And in between, there are cuts to Connor shackling Angelus in a cell downstairs. In the hotel room, Lauren strokes Faith's hair, feels her pulse. She's not looking good. Fred comes in to clean Faith's wound, and there is blood on Faith's forehead as well. In the prison cell, Connor looks at Angelus, whose face is also bloody. So we have that link between Angelus and Faith visually. Connor tells Gunn that Angelus fed from Faith. There's blood on his breath. Angelus starts twitching and struggling, though he doesn't really wake up. Gunn pulls the trank gun as Angelus mutters, "I'll kill you." But he is still clearly out of it, and it cuts to Faith muttering, "Scratch him out." I see this as the story spark or inciting incident because this is our hint that Faith and Angelus are still interacting despite that physically they're in separate rooms and they're both unconscious, and much of this story will play out here. Fred says Faith is not making any sense. Lorne takes Wesley aside and says, and speaking of sense, have you gone on a permanent sabbatical from yours? Tell me you did not shoot that girl full of junk and then feed her to Angelus. And Wesley says, it was her choice. Faith knew the risks. This is one of many examples of exposition coming in the ideal way through conflict. There is a genuine reason for Lorne to ask this question of Wesley and to be confrontational with him. He, as we'll find out, expects that Faith is going to die from this, and he guesses what it is, but he is saying to Wesley, how could you do this? And Wesley's response tells us Wesley didn't do it. Faith did it. And this goes back to what was foreshadowed in the last episode, where we kept seeing Faith saying there has to be another way. She did not want to access that darkest part of herself, as Wesley kept urging her to do. He kept saying that's the way to defeat Angelus. She rejected that. And we know it really was her choice. Wesley was not the one who pushed this. But if we don't remember that or didn't see that last episode, now we know. And none of it feels like just telling the audience information. Lorne now loudly insists that Faith could not have known, but he knows what the drug does to people, especially in a supersized dosage. Upstairs, Cordelia scoffs. A coma? Like Faith hasn't pulled that before? But Connor doesn't think Faith is faking it. Cordelia then realizes that Angelus must be in the hotel and demands to know if he's locked up. Connor tries to reassure her, telling her he'll always protect her and the baby. And Cordelia says, that's sweet. Is he guarded? I really enjoyed that bit of humor there where Cordelia's not trying to be funny, but clearly not super confident in Connor. When Connor tells her not to worry that Faith did a number on Angelus, Cordelia suddenly shoves him against the wall and she yells at him about being attracted to Faith. She's clearly jealous, or she is pretending to be jealous because she is the beast master. So perhaps she has some other reason for behaving this way. Connor insists he doesn't feel that way about Faith. And then he asks, how could Cordelia hit him with the anti-demon spell? Another great example of exposition coming in through conflict and in a very genuine way. There's this intense scene, Cordelia shoving Connor, and from last episode we know, and would have known from earlier in Angel, that she is at least part demon, and now this is a reminder that there is an anti-demon spell. And it answers a question the audience might have is, hey, wait a minute, in previous episodes, Connor can't hit Angel and discovers because of that he is part demon. Why can Cordelia do this? It also sets up the climax scene where Connor is going to attack Angelus. If we didn't deal with that anti-demon spell, the audience would not feel any suspense because we'd assume the spell would stop Connor. So this is another great way to weave in exposition very quickly through conflict without slowing the story. Cordelia, still angry, reminds Connor that she told him all three of them are different. She complains that he's not loyal to her and the baby. She thought he'd be a better father than Angel was to him, continuing her trend from previous episodes of manipulating Connor emotionally. She has turned her back to him for some of this rant, and now she turns around. There's a total mood shift, and she calls herself a crazy pregnant lady and laughs in this kind of unhinged way, and Connor looks really disturbed. She now acts concerned and tells him to go see how Faith is doing. She really wants to know. The scene cuts to Connor downstairs with the others saying, what's going to happen to her? Obviously, asking exactly what Cordelia told him to ask. But Fred first wants to know what already happened to Faith. Lauren explains that it's Orpheus, a psychedelic and also magical drug. And he says the more you take, the deeper you sink. And Wesley says it leads you down to hell and leaves you there. So we are upping the stakes, telling the audience how dangerous this is. The scene cuts to the Statue of Liberty at night and a subtitle that tells us it's 1902. Angelus is there in his leather, looking very modern day and confused. And then we see Angel. His hair is long and stringy. He's got kind of old-time clothes on. He stalks right through Angelus, who demands to know what that's all about. And from behind him, Faith says, "You tell me, it's your flashback." And she laughs when someone walks through her too, finding this all kind of fun. And she taunts Angelus about falling for her incredibly simple ruse with the drugs and guesses that this is your life vision because, quote, lack of hygiene world sure ain't mine, end quote. Looking at Angel, she now asks Angelus if he missed the invention of the bath. Angelus says that he crouched below deck with the rats the whole time. This isn't Angelus's life, it's Angel's. Faith figures she's there because she is dying and she has one last job, babysit the psycho until they shove a soul up and he cuts her off saying that won't happen. And she tells him, okay, then she's dust in the wind or a candle in the wind or some sort of wind theme. He says he thought she was done with her suicidal tendencies, but she tells him she rolled the dice and had even odds. The scene cuts to men playing dice in the street. Angelus tells Faith it's early 1920s Chicago. They're outside a blues club, and then he says, oh, no. And a car careens around the corner. Angel runs out and saves a puppy from getting run over. A very pretty woman emerges from the club and thanks Angel. It was her dog he saved. She flirts with him. And Angelus watching says that we haven't fed from a human in decades. The woman's just begging for it in his view, but Angel just tells the woman to get lost. Faith laughs at Angelus having to relive Angel's good deeds and comments that he is in hell. The scene cuts to the main lobby of the hotel. Wesley says the only thing they can do for Faith is finish what she started, re-ensoul Angel. Connor, ever one note, insists they can't do it. There's no jar, no soul. But Fred tells him she's been researching. He doesn't want to hear it and insists that while they all think he's taking it personally, he's not, and they know he's right. They need to put Angelus down. So much of this the audience would know from previous episodes, but this is a great way to weave in those reminders to make sure it's clear what is going on. Angelus's or Angel's soul is in a jar that has disappeared. Cordelia will mention later that it was stolen from a safe, their own safe. And the opposing sides on this, that Connor thinks their only choice is to kill Angel. And he has a personal grudge and really wants to kill Angel. And Fred has been trying to find another solution. And it's all done really quickly and through genuine conflict among those on the team. Though I might have, as I mentioned in the previous episodes, like Connor to have a few more layers. But here it works really well that he just wants to kill Angelus. As he is saying, there's no other option. They need to put Angelus down. Willow enters and says, I don't think so. I think you need a witch. That is at 12 minutes, 31 seconds, and we go to a commercial. I see that Willow's entry as the one-quarter twist, that first major plot turn that should come from outside the protagonist, spin the story in a new direction, and raise the stakes. Not always at this point, but often. And this doesn't exactly raise the stakes for the team, but it certainly raises them for Angelus, because until this point, he just wants to get out of that dream world, but he isn't too worried, as he said, about being re-ensouled. Willow is smiling at them. She seems very relaxed about the whole idea of re-ensoling Angel. Willow looks at Connor, guesses he is Angel's son. He is not thrilled about a witch appearing, and you can see it in his face. And Willow says, and the sneer's genetic. Who knew? And Willow looks at Wesley and comments on the Marlboro Man being there, or at least his darker, extra stubbly, mentally unstable cousin. She keeps going and says, for the love of Hecate, stop me. And Fred tells her it's okay. Fred's a yammer from way back. They exchange a look, clearly bonding, and Wesley asks if magic called Willow there, and Willow says something like, more like the call of Fred. She and Fred giggle a little, and Wesley says, of course, the only person who ever re-ensouled Angel. Willow compliments Fred's research methodology. Wesley looks just a little bit jealous because we know that he has a thing for Fred. Willow now asks where Cordelia is, and Connor says the guy they're also excited to re-ensoul shot her with a crossbow, and she's not up for visitors. A little bit more bit of exposition through conflict because he is very resentful when he says this, and he's trying to block Willow from seeing Cordelia. I really appreciated that reminder because I did not remember what excuse he and Cordelia were giving for Cordelia hiding away in the hotel room upstairs. As the audience, we know it's because Cordelia is pregnant and has not told the team yet, which is an example of dramatic irony, a technique that is used throughout this episode to great effect. Dramatic irony is where the audience knows more than the characters do about what's going on, particularly key elements. And here we know Cordelia is pregnant, and we know that Cordelia is the beast master. She's directing everyone, pulling puppet strings, and no one knows that, not even Connor. So that adds layers of tension for any scene between the two of them. And right now, it's going to add a lot to her interaction with Willow, because Wesley says he thinks Cordelia will want to see Willow given their history, something that Connor doesn't know. He probably doesn't know that Willow is from Sunnydale or that she and Cordelia went to high school together. Cordelia is in bed with the blankets over her upstairs. She smiles when Willow enters, tells Connor she's fine so he can leave. Willow sits on the edge of the bed, and there's a really fun exchange because when she asks what Cordelia's been doing or how she's been, Cordelia says, higher power. You? Willow responds, ultimate evil, but I got better. Cordelia says, you heard about Faith? And Willow comments again about the whole coma thing, which is nice that they are sharing that feeling about Faith. Willow tells Cordelia she's avoiding Angelus for now, too many bad memories, and she's glad she won't have to be in the same room with him when she re-ensouls him. As Cordelia asks if Willow really thinks she can do that, Cordelia reaches under the comforter for a knife. Willow says she is sure about putting the soul back. It's the first spell she ever learned. But the jar holding the soul is the real barrier. Cordelia agrees, and they talk about how the soul is impervious to magic. Willow confides she had no luck with a locator spell to find the jar. Consistent with when she walked in, Willow seems very relaxed about the idea of re-ensouling Angel and doing this very powerful spell. And this is one of the things that always gets in the way for me of fully enjoying this episode, which I think is a great episode, because Willow, when we last saw her do a major spell, still really struggled with the fear that she would turn back into Dark Willow. The last big spell was when she had to bring Buffy back from the past, and there was that giant monolith that she conjured, that portal. Her eyes went black. And she was really apprehensive about that and really shaken by doing it. And Kennedy was shaken. Earlier in the season, Willow struggled with doing any spells. She has done small ones, and she has gradually become more comfortable. She has had to do more and more spells. She did the spell with Andrew in Storyteller. But she is definitely not where she is like, no big deal, just doing a major spell. And sure, it was the first one Willow ever did. But when she was approaching doing that, Giles warned her about opening a door that she couldn't close in the end of season 2. And we saw Willow do that spell, and she's in the hospital room, and at some point she stops chanting Latin from the book and looks up, and it is like something has taken her over. So this is not an easy spell to do. As she and Cordelia muse about the jar and the soul, Cordelia says it's a tough nut to crack. Willow gets a look on her face like she has an idea. She asks if Cordelia's thinking what she's thinking, and Cordelia says she doubts it, a moment when that dramatic irony adds humor because we know Cordelia really means that, and she is gripping the knife now, but Willow, so excited, gets up and paces the room, so she is not in arm's length of Cordelia. Because I do enjoy this scene so much, despite my questions about Willow's character, it never occurred to me until doing the podcast outline, why doesn't Cordelia just get out of bed and kill Willow? Sure, she's still hiding her pregnancy, but if she kills Willow, Willow can't tell anyone. She can still pretend that somehow someone else did it. And all I can think is, one, she's aware that she might not succeed in killing Willow, and then Willow could tell everyone that Cordelia did this. I mean, that applies to if Willow is in arm's reach and Cordelia stabs her and doesn't succeed in killing her, but there's a greater chance that Willow's going to catch on if Cordelia has to get out of bed and cross the room with a knife rather than taking Willow by surprise. Willow now says they can just break the jar and the soul will be in the ether, and she can use a Dolothrian's arrow spell. Cordelia keeps trying to get Willow to bring her a glass of water, which would bring Willow close to the bed, but Willow's so excited she doesn't even register that Cordelia is asking this, and she runs out of the room saying she'll get Angel back. When I recorded the last episode, Salvage, I had not yet heard the news that you all probably know about by now, which is that there may very well be a new Buffy follow-up series, including Sarah Michelle Gellar reprising the role of Buffy Summers. And her involvement is part of why I think it is at least pretty likely to happen. The news says Hulu is nearing a pilot order. The pilot order just means they would say, go ahead and make a pilot for this show. And then there would still need to be the decision whether to go forward with it or not. That got me thinking about what I would like to see in a Buffy follow-up series, and I did an episode for patrons about that called What a New Buffy Needs. So if you are a patron, you can go to patreon.com/LisaMLilly and listen to that. Whether you are a patron or not, I would really love to hear your thoughts about it. Are you excited? Are you concerned? What would you like to see in a new Buffy series? And you can comment on YouTube. You can email me at buffystorypod@gmail.com, or you can comment on Patreon. You don't have to be a paid member to do that. You can sign up for free on patreon.com/LisaMLilly, and there are the regular episodes posted there, as well as some bonuses for free followers. And a reminder, if you like the way that I talk about story in the podcast and want to apply the plot turns and the points discussed to your own writing, you can get free story structure worksheets at lisalilly.com/worksheets. If you do decide to become a patron at the $25 and up level, after 2 months, you can send me your filled out worksheets, and they are pretty involved worksheets, and I will give you feedback on those. The scene cuts to Lorne talking to Faith and trying to comfort her. He starts to sing in what I'll call the dream world where Angelus and Faith are interacting. Angel, with long hair, but now combed, walks into a diner. He's got a paisley shirt, his leather duster over it, and he goes to a jukebox and plays the Barry Manilow song, Mandy, and stands there swaying to it. Faith makes fun of him, and Angelus is annoyed both at Angel and this buzzing he hears. A couple comes out of the restroom. Their heartbeats sound really loud, and Angelus talks about how every time Angel gets close to wanting to tear a human's flesh apart, it's like a knife in Angelus's gut. Faith tells him Angel's the one who belongs on the outside, not Angelus, and it's Angel's gut, not his. But Angelus tells her it's not that simple, and much as she wants to think so, putting Angelus away again doesn't mean the monster's back in his cage. Angelus is always there just below the surface. A robber enters the diner with a gun. Trivia note, the robber is played by Eliza Dushku's brother. The counter guy is so scared and nervous that he spooks the robber, who shoots him. The robber runs off. Angel rushes behind the counter, telling the guy to hang on. It looks like Angelus is going to call emergency services, but Angelus is not so sure, and he dramatically says something like, "What will he do?" And then sort of swats at the air because he's hearing this buzzing again in his head. The scene cuts to Cordelia. She's holding a glowing crystal, and she is trying to talk to Angelus through it, commanding him to awaken. Downstairs, Willow starts her spell. Wesley asks how the arrow can work with the jar, and Willow says the jar is glass, so it's crunchable. The sacred and impermeable part is the soul inside it. But she adds that you have to find something specific about the jar. She can't just shatter all the jars. And then she starts musing that she could, but lots of fun things come in jars, including she gets around to fetal pigs. Everyone loves a fetal pig. While I enjoy Willow joking around, this is, pun intended, jarring to me because, again, when she says, well, I could just shatter everything, it feels so much more like season 6 Willow when she did the spell for Xander and Anya's engagement party, and she just created party favors and decorations, and she's just like, why shouldn't I? It's so fun. This, oh, I could just break everything, feels like that Willow, not the Willow who has learned that that is really dangerous. I think all I would have needed is her to say something like, well, I could just break everything, but I've learned that's not a great way to use my power. I'm sure there's a better line you could have than that, but some very quick allusion to not wanting to go dark herself, and then she could muse, plus all the great things that come in jars. Wesley apologizes for not responding to her jokes. He says his sense of humor might be trapped in a jar somewhere. He tells her a lot has happened. He's changed. He saw a darkness in himself, and he does seem to be struggling to share this. And it's a good reminder, the last time Willow saw Wesley, he was sort of the goofy Wesley who was really struggling, was kind of messing a lot of things up, was very pompous, looked very different, acted very different, and he says he's not sure she could understand. Willow says, I flayed a guy alive and tried to destroy the world. Wesley realizes she went so much darker than he did and awkwardly is saying, oh, well, he's never done that, but he did chain a woman in a closet. And Willow says, oh, well, hey. And he says, no, it doesn't compare. That exchange did feel Willow-like. We have seen Willow in season 7 occasionally joke about, I can't even do a simple levitation spell without getting dark roots. So that felt authentic. Both of them become more serious. Wesley says she seems the same as when she left. Any other major changes? And Willow says, little things. So Fred, what's her story? This breaks character a little bit too because of two things. Willow's relationship with Kennedy, which much as I don't like it, and I would so much rather see her with Fred, she seems committed to, but more so because season 7 Willow, she never flirted with Kennedy. She was super uncomfortable when Kennedy flirted with her. She had a lot to get through before she was okay with even being involved with Kennedy. Now, maybe she was just joking. In the diner, Angel backs away from the counter guy who already died. It seems there might have been no time to call anyone, but Angelus talks about choices, and it looks like Angel's leaving the diner, and instead he locks the door, goes back around the counter, and bites and drinks from the dead body. Faith is shocked and disgusted, and her neck wound starts to bleed. Angelus tells her he's always deep inside Angel, and suggests that Angel chose to be a little bit slow to call for help so that the guy would die. And he tells her, look at Angel. She's a murderer. She knows just how good that blurry line tastes. She didn't really think this hell was private, did she? There's discordant music. We close up on the blood and cut to a commercial. And this is right around the middle of the episode. And here's where we often see a major commitment by the protagonist, or the protagonist suffer a major reversal. And this was a major reversal for Faith. Until now, she did see it as fairly black and white, and that makes sense. In Buffy, she never encountered Angelus, only Angel pretending to be Angelus, and that was for a pretty short time. Angel has been supportive of her. He is the one person who early on tried to help and that she felt did understand her, but he always drew a line that Faith had more of a choice than he did. He did not choose to become a vampire or have his soul taken away from him. I think that she has seen it that way. There's Angel, who has the soul, and Angelus, she has only seen being truly evil, and she doesn't know a lot of things that happen on Angel, the series, that I won't mention in case you have not watched it. But there were times Angel, with his soul, chose to do some pretty dark things and came really close to that line. Sometimes you would say crossed it, but she doesn't know that. And so this is a big reversal for her to see that, yeah, Angel with a soul did struggle. Maybe feeding off a dead body isn't the most awful thing. I mean, as a human, that would be an awful thing. But in this world, you know that brings him one step closer to feeding on humans, to giving into that. And it is a struggle, and he is on that blurry line. This comment about the protagonist suffering a reversal brings me to who is the protagonist here, despite a couple strong storylines and more than one person acting as a protagonist and, as we'll see, an antagonist. These stories hold together really well. So first, protagonist. I look at three things: who has the most active goal, meaning they are actively pursuing a goal, who is the main point of view character, and who has the most at stake. Now, Faith, from her time in the dream world, has the active goal of saving Angel by seeing that Angelus is put down, that he doesn't get out of the dream world, that his soul is returned. It's not a super active goal, at least she doesn't think it is, because she's kind of watching and following along, but she does see it as, hey, maybe that's her purpose, to keep an eye on this and make sure it goes the way it's supposed to go. And later, she will realize she has a different goal. And this is that first reversal, because it turns out she has things that she has to learn. She isn't just there to guide Angelus, and it isn't going to be as simple as she thought, because Angel and Angelus might not be as clear a line as she thought it was. But she does have this active goal throughout. But so do other people on the team. Fred, Wesley, Lorne, they all have the active goal of re-ensouling Angel, of saving Angel. Connor, who is more of an antagonist, is pushing back against them. He thinks Angel needs to be killed. Obviously, Faith would not want that. She's been very clear on that. So the others, too, could be a protagonist. Willow is part of that protagonist group. In a way, we have a group as protagonist, but we do always have people strongly acting, moving forward. Wesley is the most active after Faith. Willow as well is going to become very active. So if you have a group as protagonist, you need to have somebody acting for the group. And it can, as we see here, shift around. At the same time, why this works so well is that predominantly, though it's in a dream world, this is Faith's story. And when it all comes together, Faith will be the active protagonist at the climax. Who is the most active goal? I think that it is Faith, though the group has a very active goal too that they share with Faith. Main point of view character. We get a lot of points of view. We spend the most time in Faith's. All the Angel and Jealous interactions are from Faith's point of view. Faith is watching, Faith is commenting, and Jealous is talking back to her, pushing against her ideas, and later Angel will as well. So she is the character we spend the most time in her point of view. And who has the most at stake? Well, the entire gang has probably their lives if Angelus were to come back, but more so the fate of the entire world, given what the Beastmaster's plans probably are. And Faith has that at stake too, but she has more at stake because her life is immediately in danger. We are told she's going to die from Orpheus, or at least everyone's pretty sure about that, and Faith is pretty sure about that. So her life is at stake, and perhaps more important for Faith, her identity. She thinks that she has won her battle to stay reformed, to not give into that dark side of her nature. But as we'll find out, she still needs to fight that battle. So she has the most at stake. And I will talk more about the antagonist in a bit, but for now, the scene cuts to Faith. She's in bed at the hotel. She is moaning as she shifts position, and Lauren says she's in the Barrens now and says they cry for a while like they're letting go of everything that meant something. Wesley enters, and Connor, who has been sitting there with them for a bit, tells Wesley he did the right thing. Faith was brave and died in battle. Wesley ignores Connor and says it's time. He and Connor go into the main lobby. Fred is walking in a circle, holding a taper candle and ringing bells. Willow, a little more flirtation, stops her to lift her chin, tells her she's doing a great job. Willow then walks them through what they're doing using magical terms, and Gunn sums it up. Jar goes crash, and she agrees and tells Wesley it should be a snap. And I like that there are more layers to this spell, so we don't just get a repeat of what Willow did in Buffy to bring the soul back, because it is more complicated. But now there is a flashing light. Willow flies across the room, and a loud voice taunts her. She grabs her head, tells Wesley someone is in her head. We cut to Cordelia with her crystal again. She's talking to Willow in a deep voice. Willow yells back. They have a sort of mystical fight. Willow uses spells, and a marble that was part of her spell starts to glow and levitate. And Cordelia says, "You want to go, Glinda? We'll go," which I remember was in the previews for the episode. It was that clue that Willow was going to appear on Angel. Cordelia makes a swiping motion in the air downstairs. Willow stumbles, but then she stands very strong, her arms out at her sides. Her pose reminded me of Dark Willow when she was trying to raise that temple at the end of season 6, but her hair is still red. We cut to Lorne telling Faith he has stayed with her, that it'll be okay, it'll all be worth it. But Faith gasps and sits up, but she's still unconscious, but she is now sitting up. The scene cuts to the dream world. Faith's on the ground. There's garbage all around her. It's an alley, and Angelus tells her it'll all be worth it. Is that what she tries to tell herself? And he says he has a poem for her. Faith goes gently into that good night. She tells him she hears a voice in the distance, and he's about to get what's coming to him. Then there's a loud banging sound, and we see Angel clambering around in garbage cans, catching rats and eating them, and Angelus groans and says it's 20 years after the donut shop incident, and Angel has been in alleys, and his fingers have never smelled like anything but rat. So this is where we saw Angel in the flashback at the end of season 2 when the demon Whistler came to see him and told him about being able to become something and help the Slayer and fight evil. And I love that we get that filled in and we get that reference. Angelus demands to know why he has to go through all of this again. And Angel stands up straight and tells Angelus because it's not about him, jackass. The scene cuts to the hotel lobby. Everything in it is shaking. Connor says something evil is rising in the hotel. A giant, scary, glowing head appears behind Willow, and she tells them all to ignore it. She sends that marble out and tells it to find its target, which would be the jar. Cordelia in her room says, okay, huge floaty head not enough to scare you? Then why don't we try? But that marble comes flying in. Cordelia spots it. She holds a hand out and it hovers near her hand. She's clearly using a lot of effort to hold it back. Downstairs, Willow's hand is outstretched and she keeps telling the marble to break the glass. And Fred says, where's Connor? Which is a great way to cue the audience that he left the lobby so that we will not feel blindsided, as Cordelia will be in a moment. Willow commands the marble to let the soul loose, and upstairs, Connor reaches the door to the room and yells to ask if Cordy's okay. This distracts her, she loses focus, and the marble flies into the jar, breaks the glass, and she gasps. Back in the dream world, Angel asks Faith why she's still there, meaning why is she still in the dream world? She says she's waiting to see Angelus is put back. Angelus slugs Faith. Remember, before they were walking through each other and people, but now he's able to hit her, and he says he had a feeling the rules changed, and the Slayer will just be gravy once he finishes Angel off. We're about 30 minutes through the episode, so it's a little bit early, but I see this as the last major plot turn. It should grow from the midpoint, and here from that reversal where Faith realized she had to perhaps learn something too, and it should take things in another new direction and further raises the stakes, because now Faith is not just at risk from the Orpheus. It looks like Angelus might be able to kill her, and more important, it looks like she might be key to saving Angel in the real world. And he yells at Faith to get up as he fights Angelus physically. She says she's dying, and he tells her, sure, that's easier than redemption. So this is where we find out, and Faith finds out, she has got to draw on her own inner strength, that she can get out of this, but she has to do it. And she has to be willing to do it, not just drift off feeling that she made up for the evil in her life and she's paid her dues and she's at peace. In the hotel, Faith, still in that coma, she's lying down again. She looks really distressed. And in the dream world, Angel tells her he's not perfect. And even with a soul, he's done things 1,000 times that he regrets. And Angelus, while punching Angel, says, yeah, like those Manilow concerts. At the hotel, Connor yells that he's coming in. He bursts through the door. Cordelia breaks a lamp over his head and then apologizes, says she thought that horrible floaty head came back. She tells him she and the baby nearly got killed. My guess is she breaks that lamp to shatter glass so Connor won't realize that there's shattered glass in the room from the jar that held the soul. And I really love that they do that. It's not pointed out. We just have to guess that that's the reason, but it's great because otherwise, why wouldn't Connor notice the broken shards of glass? Cordelia tells him Willow opened a gateway to something evil, and if she keeps going, she'll let hell in. Connor agrees. He says he'll stop Willow. Cordelia now says he can't. Willow's too powerful, but they can stop the whole reason for all of this, and she whispered that he has to kill Angelus. Part of why I really enjoyed writing and now releasing Buffy and the Art of Story Season 3, Part 2, the book, is that Faith's arc is so compelling, and the second half of Season 3 is such a big part of that. Faith is such a compelling antagonist or villain. The mayor is as well. He's layered, he's funny, but we don't have the emotional connection with him that we do with Faith. As a viewer, in Season 3, I want Faith to get what she needs, not necessarily what she pursues, that relationship with the mayor, but I want her to have that family bond, a parent figure, close friends, her emotional needs met, someone who really cares about her. And that is why she is such a great antagonist. She's not evil, and we see this playing out in these Angel episodes now, and I just love Faith's arc. So it was a real pleasure to revisit the key parts of what I would call stage 1 for Faith in the Buffy and the Art of Story book, covering that second half of Season 3. And I found things as I wrote about each episode that I had missed doing the podcast, or I saw more layers, I should say. And sometimes I could better see how it fit with the whole arc of the season because I had that all in front of me on the screen and later on paper when I was revising. So if you're intrigued particularly by Faith and you haven't checked out the Buffy and the Art of Story books before, this is a great one to start with. You can find all the Buffy books at lisalilly.com/Buffy. The other thing that I did this year was to record an audiobook and produce it myself, The Tower, formerly known as Sears, and 2 other tales of urban horror. There's an earlier edition of that available on Patreon for patrons for free. The book will be for sale soon. I don't have links yet, as it is still getting distributed to the various audiobook platforms, but it was very fun doing that. And stay tuned, I will let you know when it's available. So that is most of what I've been doing, in addition to making progress on my new supernatural suspense novel. I'm now at the 3/4 point, literally just wrote that yesterday, and I'm super excited about that. This is the example of the antagonist being the Beastmaster, Cordelia. She's pulling the strings. She's pushing against the team to try to keep them from reinstalling Angel. She tries to affect Angelus in the dream world, but she can't. And now she can't go kill Angelus herself, but she can get Connor to do it. So now Connor is going to be taking on that role of antagonist. He's already been pushing back against the team, saying they have to kill Angelus, but now he is going to try to do it. So the antagonist role, the action part of it, shifts to Connor. But it is still Cordelia, the Beastmaster, who is controlling everything, who is doing the job of the antagonist, which is to push against the protagonist as much as possible. And Angelus, too, is acting in place of an antagonist in the dream world. And while Cordelia isn't controlling him there, he is serving that role within the dream world. So we never have a major storyline where there is no antagonistic force or no antagonist. So this is a great example of using more than one character to act as antagonist, and that can make it for a fragmented story, but here it does not, because each has a clearly defined role. Each plays a major role in the storyline that they are in, and they are all going to converge, as we'll see. Fred, Willow, and Wesley are setting up the spell to re-ensoul Angel. They talk about his soul being in the ether until Willow channels it into Angel. And they talk about Cordy and Connor's relationship being a little bit icky, as Fred says. And we cut to Cordelia in the hall, gazing into Connor's eyes, holding his hands and saying, "You have to kill your father now before anything else goes wrong." An Oedipus reference, since Cordelia was something of a mother figure to Connor when he was a baby. and she was, at the time, in love with Angel, and Angel was in love with her. Fred starts chanting. It's the same Latin we heard in Buffy when Willow did the spell. Willow responds. We cut back and forth from them to Cordelia. She tells Connor that she has fought to save Angel's life, but killing him, much as she loves him, and she adds, as a friend, is the only way to guarantee the family's safety. Connor has to protect her and the baby and the world. Quote, sometimes one death can spare infinite pain, end quote. And I feel like this is a big theme in Angel, these questions of do the means justify the ends. Cordelia is certainly saying that here. Killing Angelus can be justified to save the world. But as in the Buffy, in Angel, that is always a very questionable tactic. Good guys generally push back against that idea. Buffy does everything to push back against whether you should kill someone to save the world. But we do have varying views on that. And there are times, as when Giles killed Ben, that the show suggests it might be all right, or it might be the only option. Angel keeps beating up Angelus in the dream world. Angelus doesn't really care about that. He's yelling at Faith to wake up, and she mumbles, rolled the bones, good for me. Angel tells her he used to think there was a point when he paid his dues. And Angelus says, anybody notice a battle with your alter ego going on here? We cut to Connor in slow motion, stalking down the hall. There's a voiceover of him asking Cordelia what he will tell the others. And Cordy says they can't stop him if they don't know. He asks, what about the sanctuary spell, which we flagged earlier? And she says she can fix it and says, we're special, Connor. Willow keeps chanting Latin. Connor lurks and watches for a moment from out of sight, then moves on. In the dream world, the fight continues. Angel grabs Faith and tells her she saw him drink. It doesn't get much lower than that. He thought he could make up for it by disappearing, a reference to living in alleys. Faith says it's her time, and Angel tells her their time is never up. They pay for everything. She tells him it hurts, and he says he knows. We're now moving into the climax, that final confrontation between the opposing forces. Here, the group / Faith versus evil, Cordelia and Angelus and Connor. Angelus is a big part of what ties the storylines together. He is acting in place of the antagonist, pushing against Faith, pushing against Angel, pushing so that he is not re-ensouled. So he is also pushing against the larger group. And even though Cordelia is not directly pulling his strings, he's aligned with her, but he is the antagonist in the plot of Faith's internal struggle, although she is really fighting against herself and her own views and her own feeling for who she is, much as she did in the previous episode, but she's not done. And that's part of what she had to realize. She is not done. It is not time to go gently into that good night. And Angelus is the one who is being the outward expression of some of that. And that's what ties the two storylines together so well, because he is also an antagonist in the real world, despite that he's lying there unconscious, because he's aligned with the beast. He doesn't want to be re-ensouled, and the group there is pushing against him. So it all comes together. As Willow chants, Connor enters the basement. He punches Gunn and knocks him out. In the dream world, Angel tells Faith he needs her to get up and fight, but she doesn't. And Angelus brains him with a pipe and says he won't miss the moralizing. And he tells Angel the soul's already in the ether. And usually you can't really bring the soul back from the ether, but he doesn't know how good Willow is at all of this now. He goes on, how about he sends it off to that great puppy rescue in the sky? And he's very full of himself, Angelus is, and from behind him, Faith, now sounding very strong and not at all out of it, says, "Arf, arf, psycho." Angelus turns around and she says it looks like she's back in the game. He swings at her, but she disappears because what matters now is the real world. And we cut to Faith in the hotel. She opens her eyes. She gets out of bed. Willow's orb of Thessaly glows and she's chanting, and in the dream world, bright light flashes through Angelus. Angel is lying in the cell and he mutters, "I need you to fight." But Connor is over him in the real world with a stake, and he says he knows what Angel needs, faith. Grabs Connor from behind. They fight. Lorne comes down and says, "She's alive. It's a miracle." He and Wesley watch the fight, which happens very fast. Faith throws Connor across the room. She then kicks him toward the cage. Angel grabs him by the neck. He is revived. He's out of those shackles, and he tells Connor, "It's over. It's him." All our protagonists prevailed. Our group that was working in the real world to re-ensoul Angel, they did their part, and Faith did her part by coming back to the real world, not letting herself feel like she was done and she could go off in peace. She came back to the real world and she stopped Connor. And if she hadn't done that, the re-ensouling would not have mattered. So it all converges to the same point. Now we're in the falling action section where we tie up loose ends, resolve subplots, and set up later episodes. And a quick note on the dream world. Dreams often, I've talked about this, can be very frustrating to an audience, whether it's a reader or it's visual storytelling, because ultimately it's like, yeah, but it's just a dream. This dream sequence is so extended and yet it works. Well, there's two reasons. One is it does have its own story. We think it's at first the story of Angelus having to revisit his life as Angel, and maybe there's some purpose there, or it's to torment him. And we find out it is for Faith. It's for Faith to see that it isn't an evil-good divide, that there is that blurry line, that Angel, even with a soul, walked it. So she realizes she has to keep fighting. There is no, oh, now I'm done, and I've made up for it. I don't feel like Faith was trying to take the easy way out that way. She worked very hard to reform, as Angel has done. They have both done a lot to become better people. Faith, particularly in these recent episodes and in the last Angel crossovers. But she has to keep fighting, which is such a theme of Angel, that you keep fighting, whether or not you think you will win, whether or not you can ever balance the scales, you keep fighting. And Faith needed to learn that for herself. And she did. In the course of that dream world, she did. And it then affected the real world. So there were real world consequences. And without either the re-ensouling or Faith coming back to stop Connor, the team would not prevail. So that dream sequence mattered not only to Faith's internal growth, but to the story as a whole and to the action part of the plot. It also served the purpose of making those sequences that are really just Willow setting up a spell. And there was pushback from Cordelia, but Willow prevailed, and then setting up the second part of the spell and doing it, which could be fairly quick sequences. Having this dream sequence, having Faith need to work through all of this adds a lot of conflict, adds action to what otherwise is not terribly active, because while Cordelia is pushing back, she isn't, except for that one scene, physically in the room with Willow. She doesn't physically fight Willow. It is magical. And while the dream sequence doesn't involve a lot of physical fighting to the end, there is a lot of action. It isn't just people talking, and it isn't sitting and doing a spell. It is action as we see these scenes from Angel's life, and Faith reacts, and she and Angelus interact. So it adds more action to what could have felt like a static episode. So now we tie up loose ends. Outside at night in the hotel garden, Faith and Angelus sit side by side. He asks how she feels, and she says like she was fed mushrooms and beaten up by a bear. But she's still going to Sunnydale. Willow convinced her she's needed there, and Angel says, never stop fighting. Faith responds, hey, I was gonna, but someone got all pep talky on me. He says he has a lot to thank her for. She says it goes both ways, but if they get started, it'll lead to hugs, and Angel agrees that no one wants that. Inside, Connor says he gets it. He messed up. He's talking to the gang. Faith walks in and says it just makes him one of them. Gunn says he wished he'd seen Faith wipe the floor with Connor. Faith turns to Wesley and just says, Wes. Wesley says, Faith. And Faith glances at Angel and says, see? And she tells him Wesley knows how to say goodbye and tells the others Angel wanted to hug. And Angel says, no, I didn't. Fred is telling Willow about a book she's given her about the Hellmouth that might help in Sunnydale. And she starts gushing about another book and how she'd like to talk to Willow about it. And Willow says, I'm seeing someone. Fred looks really disappointed. Willow says goodbye to everyone. Faith tells her Angel will want to thank her for everything, but Willow says she got a Slayer out of the deal, so they're even, and she hugs Angel, which is really nice, and he seems very comfortable hugging her, despite his dislike of hugs. And this shows the difference between Willow and Faith, between Willow and Angel, and it does feel authentically Willow, as does her comment to him that she'll tell Buffy he said hi, and Angel just says, good, thanks. Willow tells them next time they resurrect Angelus to call her first. She and Faith leave. Angel looks at everyone and says, so we're back. He starts to say something more, but Cordelia appears on the stairs in this lacy black dress. And it is kind of, I think it's a two-piece, and it shows her bare midriff. It is very clear that she is very pregnant. She tells Angel she's sorry, but if this is a speech about the worst is behind them, he may want to save it for later. There's a close-up on her midriff, and we go to credits. So we have set up both Buffy, because we know Faith is going with Willow to Sunnydale, and the next episode of Angel, because Cordelia has now revealed that she is pregnant. One last thing about out of character Willow. Ultimately, breaking this down for the podcast, I can see why they avoided any reference to Dark Willow. Well, Willow talked about Dark Willow, but they avoided any suggestion that Willow was still concerned about this or about doing the spell. And given all that's going on, the involved storyline in the dream world, the Connor Cordy storyline, the spell storyline, Faith perhaps dying from the Orpheus, there is so much here that to try to include some reference to Willow struggling with doing the spell, I think would be too much. It is not necessary for the Angel storyline, and much as it bothers me because it is out of character for season 7 Willow, it probably was the right choice. This is Angel's show. It is not about Willow, and there are enough character arcs and subplots here without going into Willow's. I do wonder if there might have been some quick way to address it, but then you'd be raising all these story questions, and there were fans who never watched Buffy. So probably that was a deliberate choice rather than, as I originally thought, a result of the writers not being all that familiar with season 7 Willow. Although that could be the case as well. They might not know more than the basics of what happened. And it also can be seen as this is how the characters in Angel see Willow. She would still joke around a little, certainly. They don't know that backstory, and they wouldn't pick up on it even if there were hints that she was uncomfortable, much as in the other Faith crossovers where Buffy came to LA, she seems so much more angry and harsh because possibly that is how Angel was seeing her given where he was emotionally. So I can also kind of headcanon it that way. That's it for this episode, other than foreshadowing and spoilers, if you're not sticking around for that. Thank you so much for listening. Come back in 2 weeks for Buffy Season 7, Episode 18, Dirty Girls, where Faith arrives in Sunnydale the same time as Caleb, a super powerful misogynistic preacher, and where Buffy takes an army of potentials into battle. And we are back for foreshadowing, which does include spoilers for Buffy and Angel. We already know Faith is going to Sunnydale. A lot of who she is and her confidence arises from what happened in Angel. She will still be more freewheeling, shoot from the hip more than Buffy, but she'll be a steadying force as well. And she has much more emotional intelligence than before. And we saw that in this episode. She, at the end, encouraged Connor. She doesn't make Angel hug. She jokes with him about it. But she knows that he does want to thank Willow, and she says it for him. I really loved following her journey over this 3-episode arc. It tested her resolve to be who she wants to be in the outside world. And much as we don't have Willow's story take over in Angel, covering all this now allows Faith to go to Sunnydale, and it is still Buffy's show. It is about Buffy. Faith will be significant in that. She and Buffy will clash a bit, but Faith doesn't need to resolve all those issues in Buffy because she has done it here. I think watching these episodes is key to seeing and understanding how Faith is when she gets to Buffy, and that's why I covered them, as well as because Willow. But it frees up the space in Buffy to deal with all the storylines there, and you will have a richer understanding of Faith, but you don't have to have watched the Angel episodes. You could still follow all of Buffy. There is a little irony, as opposed to dramatic irony, with a couple references to, Faith's in a coma again, because Cordelia will end this season of Angel in a coma. So a little bit of foreshadowing there. What could have been foreshadowing, but alas does not pay off, is that Willow and Fred, I so want them to at least meet again, but they do not. Faith being in Angel's head and being so close to him, really bonding with him, deepening their connection, adds to the tension between her and Buffy, adding a lot of layers to that. And finally, this mention of what's going on in Sunnydale sows a seed. Angel knows things are dire in Sunnydale. Maybe he even heard more about it from Willow off screen. We don't see it. So that when Angel appears on Buffy, it fits that he has a reason to have known how bad things were, a reason to know that there is a battle that he might be able to take part in, or maybe should take part in, and he will bring with him an amulet that he gets from Wolfram and Hart, that evil law firm that we had some references to in the earlier episodes. And that's the amulet that Spike will wear at the end of Buffy to kill off the remaining Turricons. That is it for foreshadowing and for this episode. Thank you again for listening. Come back in 2 weeks for Buffy Season 7, Episode 18, Dirty Girls, where Buffy takes an army of potentials into battle along with Faith to try to defeat Caleb, a misogynistic preacher who is super powerful and is aligned with the First. You can find back Buffy in the Art of Story episodes, as well as the Buffy in the Art of Story books and all my fiction and nonfiction at lisalilly.com. For more Buffy in the Art of Story content, early releases of regular podcast episodes, and access to my course, How to Plot Your Novel from Idea to First Draft, join the Patreon community at patreon.com/LisaMLilly. That's patreon.com/LISA, M as in Marie, LILLY. Music for this episode was written and performed by Robert Newcastle. Buffy in the Art of Story is a production of Spiny Woman, LLC. Copyright 2025. All rights reserved.